Hello, welcome to Yoga by Lucy at Home. This is a short tutorial designed to help you with your yoga squat pose. It would be useful if you had a rolled up blanket and or a flat yoga block and possibly a yoga brick too. So the yoga squat, sometimes known as garland pose or in Sanskrit Malasana pose, is a complex posture involving many joints and muscle groups, and all of these factors play a role in how we look and feel in the pose. The good news is that by examining your squat pose, we can learn more about the body's limitations and possibly explain why you find it challenging. So if your heels don't touch the floor in your squat pose, it may be, but only maybe, that this could be improved over time by working on the problem areas. This could be shortness in the Achilles tendon, it could be a tightness of the soleus muscle, which is the deeper lower calf muscle. Inner arches of the feet collapsing could mean tightness in the hamstrings at the hips or tightness of the hip rotators, all manner of things, a weakness of the abdominal muscles, tightness on the IT band running from the outside of the hip to the outside of the knee. All these areas could contribute to you finding this pose challenging. But maybe even over time and with a great deal of practice, it doesn't improve. And this could be a problem of physics and leverage to do with the architecture of the bones and your ankles. So the ankle can only bend until the shin bone, the tibia, collides with the topmost foot bone. And this bone-on-bone limitation is called compression, which determines the range of motion in most of our joints. So if the angle is not generous, then the knees can't bend far enough without the heels lifting away from the ground. So if you've been doing yoga for quite a while and working on this and still finding it hard, then that could explain why. But you should understand that it's fine to keep the heels raised. Heels to the ground is not the holy grail of yoga. It can be beneficial to practice with support underneath the heels, which I will show you, but without always relying on that, as this will prevent the activation of the muscles of the feet, which stabilise the arches and allow more flexion in the ankle. And you'll find that some of these mechanics and restrictions come into play in other yoga poses as well. So some of the standing poses, for example, Warrior One, grounding down that back heel. In your downward dog, you may find that grounding the heels is not possible, and that's this same angle of the shin bone and the bone at the top of the foot are meeting, and that any tightness across the Achilles heel or the calf will also come into play and prevent you from lowering your heels down. So I'm now going to show you some ways to practice during your class, or if you're in the midst of a flow or a sequence. So if you haven't got time to gather a prop around you, it's absolutely fine, as I said before, to be in what I'll call the hover squat, where your heels are hovering away from the floor. It stretches all the same regions as the heel down pose. It can obviously be a little bit harder to balance if your feet are flat. It's easier to balance than when you're balancing just on your toes. And then we've got the propped squat. So even if you're in the midst of a sequence, if you've got something like a rolled up blanket to hand, you can land the heels on top of your prop. And that allows you, it gives you the confidence to lean your weight back a little bit. And this works equally well with a flat block, although that slightly limits the width that you can have your feet. But again, you can take your heels back supported like that. And also, it might feel like cheating, but not a bad way to practice, is you can take a brick underneath your sit bone so you know you're not going to fall down. And this allows you to explore the posture a bit, to ease out and open out with the elbows between the knees to elongate the spine. So that's also an option. And then some people find it a bit easier to come into what I'll call the goddess squat, where the feet are wider and the toes are turned out a little bit more. It's a bit harder to get the extension through the spine in this pose. If you're doing it, you want to aim to keep your toes in line with the centre of your ankles, and work on keeping the weight on the outer edge of the feet rather than allowing the arches to collapse and the knees to come in, and your elbows here can help with that. So remember, this is not a one-size-fits-all pose. You need to play around with your stance and see what feels right for you. You could practice maybe in front of a mirror. You may notice that you're not totally symmetrical in this pose, and that's perfectly normal as well, to have tightnesses in one side of the body more so than the other. If you're in your pose and you can balance, if you use your elbows to draw your knees apart, and then you lift up the pelvic floor muscles, lift the base of the rib cage, engage the abdominal muscles, and then lowering the chin slightly. All these things help you elongate the spine. So I'm now going to show you some ways that you can practice when you're by yourself and you're doing your self-practice. So I'm going to be using a door handle, but you can use anything strong that supports your weight. So for example, a strap looped around a table leg, and that's going to look like this with the door handle. So I'm holding this, it's supporting my weight, and then I can lower down into my squat and not worrying so much about gravity because I'm holding on, I'm not going to fall backwards. If your heels don't come down, that's fine. You can also do the hovering version. So that's one option. So another way to practice when you're on your own and doing your self-practice is with a wall. So define the laws of physics with the support of the wall. You can have your hips and your spine completely flat back against the wall, and then this will allow you to lengthen and strengthen the muscles and the tendons needed to help improve the pose. And whichever version of the pose you're in, you'll find that after a while these muscles down the fronts of your shins really begin to fatigue, but they will strengthen over time. So keep practicing, be aware of what you're feeling in the pose and where you're feeling it, and you never know, it may become a pose that you actually begin to enjoy. Thank you.